Hi there, I'm a sea turtle, and today I'm going to share my story. If you knew how tough it was to be a baby turtle, you'd totally understand why we're so relaxed. Because if we survive the first few months on this planet, we can live for 100 years or more, and there's not much else that can stir us up. At least, that's what I thought. Let me start all the way at the beginning. Yeah, you guessed right, that's me. Exactly 20 seconds old, just hatched, struggling to make it to the surface, but I made it. Now, where there's one baby turtle, you can bet there are more. Did I say more? I meant way more, like hundreds. Now, the problem is, we're pretty easy prey, and there are many creatures out there who know that. There are crabs, birds, and dogs waiting to feast. Dangers await us little ones everywhere. Only about 1% of us actually make it to the ocean alive and survive our first year. But I was one of the lucky ones. I made it. Against all odds, I reached the water, dove through the waves, and swam deeper and deeper into the open ocean. I was free. Some think that the life of a turtle can be a bit boring, but for me, this was never a problem. Just look around. There's fun and adventure everywhere. Life was good. I'm now 25 years old, which is actually quite young for us sea turtles. My Aunt Myrtle, she's 90. I've traveled thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean, and boy, have I seen a lot. But everything changed today. I was swimming in the deep ocean where there's so much food. Going here once in a while and filling up on seagrass can keep me going for days. But then it happened. I was eating peacefully when I saw a giant net coming up behind me, decimating the seafloor and engulfing everything in its path. There was a boat far above the sea, hauling the net as it scraped the seafloor, taking fish, shellfish, 100-year-old coral, and more along with it, leaving behind an eerie, barren path of an ecosystem destroyed. I desperately tried to swim away, but the net was swallowing me with all the other sea life in its path. I can ordinarily hold my breath for more than 4 hours, but us sea turtles, when we're stressed, we can drown in a matter of minutes. I desperately fought to free myself from the net so I could get to the top of the ocean for a breath of air. But the net just kept dragging me down along the bottom of the deep sea floor. Eventually, I had to take a breath, but instead of air, my lungs filled with water. Help!
The sea turtle perished with thousands of other sea creatures and marine life caught by a single bottom trawler. Her lifeless body was hoisted onto the ship and spilled out onto the deck with thousands of pounds of other sea creatures, most still flapping and flailing as they suffocated around her. Bottom trawling is indiscriminate. Roughly a quarter of the world's seafood is caught through bottom trawling, and it's estimated that up to 90% of what is caught is bycatch that's later discarded. We've lost half of all marine life over the past 50 years, but it doesn't have to continue. Very few of us depend on eating fish for our survival. We can take the immediate step of leaving sea animals off our plates, ending our demand for these destructive commercial practices. Please, if you care about sea turtles and the dolphins, sharks, and all the creatures who call the ocean home, leave sea animals off your plate. By switching to plant-based foods, we can change the course of history and help our ocean heal.
I'm number 268. Well, that's the number they stapled into my ear when I was born on the dairy farm. I don't have a name, but today I'm going to share my story. I've heard that most people have been taught that we are these magical milk machines that live on rolling green hillsides, producing an endless supply of milk for people to enjoy. Well, that couldn't be farther from the truth. I want to share with you what my life is really like, and what it takes to get my milk into your glass. Okay, let me rewind to the beginning. When I was born, I had only a few hours with my mom before a man came and dragged me away from her. She let out anguished bellows from behind the metal bars that kept her from coming after me, watching in distress as they violently yanked my newborn body away. This is the first thing I experienced in life. Apparently they do this because I'm not allowed to continue drinking my mother's milk, and instead they package it up and they sell it to you. I was dumped into a tiny, isolated pen. Since I'm not allowed to drink my own mother's milk, they fed me a milk replacement formula, but they only came to feed me twice a day. For the first few months of my life, I was hungry and desperate to suckle most of the time. I didn't have room to walk, run, or play, to make friends. I was denied virtually everything that was natural. I was standing in my own waste, and I lived like this for 6 months until I reached puberty. As soon as I became fertile, life got much worse. Just like humans and other mammals, we only produce milk for our young, so we must become pregnant before we begin lactating. But while this may sound like a natural phenomenon, there's nothing natural about what happens in today's dairy farms. I was put into what they call a rape rack and was forcibly impregnated by a human using artificial insemination. Like so many other females in the dairy industry, I was violated and exploited for my reproductive system. I was pregnant for 9 long months, and just like most mothers, when my baby finally came, I was overwhelmed with joy, love, and protectiveness. I cleaned him, nourished him with my milk, and we bonded immediately. His small body was snuggling against mine to keep warm in the night. He was perfect. But just as I was torn from my own mother not even a day after my birth, so was my son torn from me. Of all the pain I had endured, this was the worst. I cried out, desperate to have my baby back in my protective care, but it was no use. I knew what would happen to him. Since he was male, he would never produce milk and was of little value to the dairy industry, so he would be sent to a veal farm. There, my baby boy would be confined so tightly that he could barely move. He'd be fed an iron-deficient diet until he became severely anemic. His muscles would atrophy, and after 3 or 4 months, he'd be killed. The flesh of my calf would then be sold as high-priced veal. As soon as my baby was taken away, I was hooked up to a mechanical milk machine that pumped the milk from my body, the milk that I made for my calf. I was milked twice a day for an entire year until I had little left to give. By that point, my udder was swollen and infected with something called mastitis. Lots of the cows around me had it, and it was incredibly painful. After that year, the traumatic cycle began all over again. I was again forcibly impregnated, and again suffered the heartbreak of losing another child, and again had to endure months of mechanical milking. This cycle continued every single year of my life until now. I'm just 7 years old, still an adolescent considering I can live to be 25 or 30 years. But I'm tired, I'm weak. My milk production levels are falling, and according to the men, I'm all used up and no longer profitable to the farm. This morning, the men loaded me onto a truck with dozens of other cows, and that brings me to now. We're bumping along the road, and I know where I'm headed. When cows are taken away, they never come back. I've heard the men joking about how we'll be sent to slaughter and our bodies will be butchered for meat, most likely for hamburgers. I just want to leave you with one plea. Please, leave our milk for our babies, and stop supporting industries that exploit us from profit. If sharing my story can spare even one cow from this life of misery, maybe this won't have all been for nothing. Be a part of creating a kinder world. Hi there, I'm a pig and here's my story. You might expect that my life is like the pig in the movie Babe, full of playful moments with other animals, but that's not my story at all. My life started out rough and it's only gotten worse. You see, just like nearly all pigs in the United States, I was raised on a factory farm. I was born on a hard, wet, urine-soaked floor with my 9 siblings. My mother was confined in a farrowing crate so tight that she couldn't even turn around. She'd already gone through 5 pregnancies by the time I was born, and she's never had a single moment outdoors. When I was just a few days old, I was grabbed up by one of the humans. I squealed and kicked, but couldn't get away. He took some sharp clippers and cut off my tail, leaving only a tiny stub. Then he cut open my scrotum, tearing out my testicles. Next, he forced open my mouth and cut the ends of my 2 teeth. And then he cut deep notches into my ears. All of this happened without a drop of anesthetic. I felt every agonizing cut and tear. And my case wasn't the least bit unusual. This is what's done to every piglet raised on a factory farm. It wasn't long after that, when I was only 3 weeks old, that I was taken from my mother. She screamed as we were carried away, but it was no use. That was the last time that I saw her. I was taken to another building, and for the next 7 weeks, I was stuck in a terribly crowded pen with more than 20 other pigs. We walked around on slated concrete, and our waste fell through into a huge pit dug under the building. You can imagine the horrible smelling fumes from all the manure and urine building up. After a few more traumatic location transfers, I was given a shot of something called ractopamine, which caused my body to start putting on more muscle. After 5 painful months on this earth, I already weighed more than 200 pounds. I was in terrible health. I had trouble breathing because the ammonia-choked air had eaten lesions into my lungs, but I could still walk when the men came, yelling at us, stabbing us with electric prods as we were hurried onto the truck. There were little holes in the side of the truck, and I had moments when I could see humans, warm in their neighboring cars, peering back into my eyes as we were trucked through the freezing cold. And that brings me to now. The truck just pulled up to a building, and I'm terrified. Each of us knows we've arrived at a bad place. All the pigs around me are panicking. I feel a shock as a man shoves an electric prod into my back, and I fumble forward off the truck, landing in a pen. The gates open and I desperately try not to go through it, but the men with prods force us forward into a chute. I land in a small chamber with several other pigs. The chamber lowers down and our air turns to noxious gas.
I frantically try to climb out and reach fresh air, but the horrible gas is inescapable. It hurts to breathe. We're all in agony, trying to get our noses up as high as possible to reach breathable air. One by one, we collapse in this gas chamber. After he passes out, his body is hoisted into the air by his leg and his throat is cut. The blood and life drains from his body. He's disemboweled, skinned, and then butchered for bacon and other cuts of meat that soon make its way to the grocery store, neatly packaged in cellophane with no indication of the life it once was. Too few of us consider the source of our food. Please remember that when we eat bacon, ham, sausages, and other pork products, our food had a face and a story. And that story didn't have a happy ending, a happy middle, or a happy beginning. We can help create a better story. We can create a story in which humans treat other animals with kindness rather than cruelty. By choosing vegan foods, we can prevent unimaginable amounts of cruelty and suffering and help build a kinder world for us all.
Chickens are very much like you and me. Intelligent and socially oriented, they lead emotionally rich lives. In natural habitats, they are inquisitive, curious, and playful, and develop strong social communities. They love to run, roost, and dust bathe. And of course, mother hens are extraordinarily protective of their chicks. Here is the life story of one of those hens.
Hi, my name is, well, I don't have a name. I'm a chicken, a hen to be exact. I was born in a hatchery that sells young hens to America's egg companies. I was not even 1 day old when I was dropped onto a conveyor belt with hundreds of other chicks. One by one, we were grabbed up by huge hands so we could be sorted. The boys were dropped down one chute and the girls were dropped down another. I heard that the boys were sent down another conveyor that poured them into a chute that ground them up alive, all because they aren't valuable to the egg industry. Isn't that horrible? Then someone grabbed me and shoved my face into a device that seared off nearly half my beak. It cut through sensitive nerves and I was in so much pain that I could scarcely eat for days. Over the next few days, some of the chicks around me died from dehydration and weakened immune systems, but I managed to survive. I thought I was a lucky one. I was then thrown into something that they call a rearing cage, where they wait for us chicks to grow up. Instead of running outdoors or dust bathing, I grew up standing in the dark amid muck. After a few months, I was put in a crate and trucked to a factory farm. I lived in a wire cage in a long, windowless, filthy shed. More than 100,000 hens were around me. My feathers wore away, and I suffered constant scrapes and bruises. We were all so tightly crammed together that we had no choice but to urinate and defecate onto one another. The ammonia from the airborne urine droplets would eat into my lungs. After a few months, one of the birds in the cage died and began to rot as we laid just one egg with each passing day. Her body was never removed from the cage. Yet somehow, I survived. And again, I thought I was a lucky one, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Once my egg production dropped, I was torn from the cage and thrown into a dark, eerie chamber on wheels. And that brings me to now. My body landed atop other hens who are shrieking and flapping. Gas is entering the chamber. Birds around me are falling limp, life drained from their bodies. I know I'm next, but I don't want to die. This time, I'm not going to be the lucky one. In fact, in these moments before death, I realize that I never was.
Once dead, her body was sent to a rendering plant to be used for pet food, farm animal feed, or other low-grade uses. In the time it has taken you to watch this video, more than 1,500 layer hens have been killed in the US alone. Most people frying up their morning eggs have no idea about the suffering that went into them, and would never be okay with it if they did.
Isn't what I'd see. The sky's not blue and the field's not green.
Choose compassion. Skip the eggs.
My broken life will never stay. Try too hard and I always lag. Days are gray and the nights are black.